I'm not the type to overthink things. If my wife, Jenna, came home late, I always assumed she'd just been caught up at work. If her phone buzzed late at night, I figured it was her friend group chatting about some reality show. After all, we'd been married for 8 years and I trusted her. Maybe too much. Jenna was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Confident, charming, and endlessly beautiful. People always said how lucky I was, and I believed them. But over the past few months, something felt off. Started small. Changes I couldn't quite put my finger on. She was always on her phone, smiling at texts I never got to see. Her laughter, once a sound I could recognize from a mile away, became guarded. Her affection felt distant, mechanical even, as if she were checking a box rather than connecting with me. I told myself it was work stress. Jenna's job at a marketing firm had been demanding lately, and she had to attend more client dinners and networking events than usual. But then there were other things harder to explain. She started dressing up more often, even for mundane errands. New lingerie appeared in her drawer, the kind I hadn't seen her wear in months, if not years. "Who's that for?" I joked once, holding up a lace bodysuit with the tag still attached. Her answer was quick, rehearsed. "It's for you, dummy. Maybe I just want to surprise you sometime." But the surprise never came. I shrugged off my unease for weeks, maybe months. I told myself not to be paranoid, not to ruin the trust that had always been the foundation of our marriage. I convinced myself I was imagining things, even when she started working late on Fridays, the one night we used to set aside just for us. It all came to a head last weekend. We had planned a relaxing Saturday at home, just the two of us. Jenna mentioned having a quick errand in the morning. Something about picking up a client's portfolio she'd left at her coworker's house. She left without breakfast, kissed me on the cheek, and promised she'd be back by noon. But noon came and went. When the clock hit 2 p.m., I tried calling. She didn't pick up. I texted her, "Everything okay?" and got a single-word response, "Busy." That's when the first crack in my trust appeared. Jenna had always been bad at lying. It wasn't so much her words as the way she avoided eye contact or answered too quickly. And this felt wrong. I sat on the couch, replaying her excuses in my head, a sinking feeling growing in my stomach. Something was happening, something she wasn't telling me. By 4 p.m., she finally came home, looking flustered but composed. "Sorry, that took longer than I thought," she said, brushing past me to drop her bag on the kitchen counter. I tried to act normal even as my gut screamed otherwise. "Everything okay? You were gone all day." She waved me off, opening the fridge for a bottle of water. "Yeah, just a mess with the portfolio. Don't worry about it." But I couldn't stop worrying. That night, after Jenna fell asleep, I made a decision I'd never thought I'd have to make. I picked up her phone from the nightstand and opened it. I hated myself for it, but I had to know. And that's when everything started to unravel. Jenna's phone was locked, of course. She had changed the passcode months ago, claiming it was for work security. But I wasn't an idiot. I had seen her swipe through her phone 100 times. Muscle memory kicked in, and I entered her usual combination. It worked. I stared at the glowing screen, heart pounding. This wasn't something I'd ever done before, and the weight of what I was about to do felt suffocating. But I pressed forward, navigating to her messages. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The usual group chats with her friends, a few boring exchanges with coworkers, even a message from her mom reminding her about some family dinner next month. I almost felt relieved. Maybe I was wrong. Then I saw it. A chat titled Special Delivery, with no contact name, just a random series of emojis. My stomach twisted. It didn't look like a work chat or something casual. It was too deliberate, too private. I opened it. The first thing I saw was a photo of Jenna. She was sitting in what looked like someone's living room, wearing the same black dress she'd worn earlier that day. She was laughing, holding a glass of wine, her legs casually crossed. It looked innocent enough, until I noticed the hand on her thigh. Not mine. I scrolled up, feeling like a train had hit me. The messages were graphic, flirty at first, then explicit, detailing plans for that day. Can't wait to see you again. One of his messages read. Think you'll be wearing that for long? Her reply made my blood boil. We'll see if you're good enough to deserve it. I had to put the phone down. My hands were shaking so badly I thought I might drop it. She was cheating on me. The woman I trusted with my life, the woman I'd built a home with, was sneaking around behind my back. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, my breath shallow and erratic. A part of me wanted to storm into the bedroom, wake her up, and demand an explanation. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I went back to the messages, scrolling further, piecing together the timeline. This wasn't new. It had been going on for months. They'd meet up at hotels, in his car, and even, God help me, in our house while I was at work. Then I found the video. It was from that very afternoon, timestamped just a few hours ago. She had sent it to him. My hands shook as I hit play. The screen lit up with her face, smiling coyly into the camera. She was sitting on a couch, legs crossed seductively. Missing you already? She whispered, before blowing a kiss and winking. I had seen that same couch before. I knew exactly where she was. It was his house. The next morning, I couldn't look at Jenna without my blood boiling. She was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone like everything was fine. She smiled at me when she caught me watching her. Morning, she said, her tone light and carefree. Morning, I replied, forcing a smile. Inside, I was screaming. I had stayed up all night, replaying the video, the messages, and every single moment over the past few months that suddenly made sense. But I wasn't going to explode. Not yet. I wanted more than just a fight. I wanted her lies to collapse on top of her, trapping her with no way out. Busy day ahead? I asked casually, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Yeah, just meetings and errands, she said, her eyes still on her phone. I clenched my jaw. Errands again? You've been running a lot of those lately. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, just for a second, before she laughed nervously. You know how it is. Work's been crazy. I nodded, pretending to buy it. Of course. Let me know if you need help with anything. Her phone buzzed, and she turned it over quickly, shielding the screen from me. I pretended not to notice. That day, while she went off to her errands, I started setting my plan in motion. If she thought she could humiliate me, she was about to learn what humiliation really felt like. While Jenna was out, I took the day off work. I needed every second to prepare. The first step was securing proof. Undeniable, irrefutable evidence that would leave no room for her to weasel her way out. I couldn't just rely on the messages and the video I'd already seen. I needed more. I started with the basics. Her laptop was password protected, but I'd watched her type it in countless times. Within minutes, I was in. The browser history told me more than I wanted to know. Searches for hotels, lingerie sites I'd never heard of, and even a page for discreet meetup locations. Then I checked her emails. There they were, conversations with her lover, including dates and times of their meetups. He called her babe, sweetheart, and once even my future. That word hit me like a sledgehammer. Future? What the hell did he mean by that? But the messages weren't just about sneaking around. They mocked me, indirectly but enough for me to piece it together. Don't worry about him. He's clueless, he'd written. Her response, yeah, he doesn't ask questions. It's almost too easy. Too easy? That phrase burned in my head. I printed out every single email, screenshot every text and photo, and backed up the files on a secure drive. The next step was more invasive. I installed a hidden camera in the living room, a spot I knew she often used for her private phone calls. It was discreet, almost invisible. If she brought him into our house again, I'd have it all. This wasn't just about catching her. It was about control, making sure I had every piece of the puzzle so that when the time came to confront her, there'd be no escape. By the time she came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to go through some work emails. Long day, I asked as she walked in. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and said, exhausting. I nodded, hiding the storm brewing inside me. She had no idea what was coming. By the time Friday rolled around, I was ready. Jenna had her usual work dinner planned for the evening. Another excuse that made my blood boil now that I knew the truth. But instead of confronting her right away, I decided to let her dig herself deeper. That morning, as she got ready, I played my part perfectly. "You're working late again tonight?" I asked, sipping my coffee at the counter. "Yeah, it's a client dinner," she replied, tying her hair up into a neat bun. "Shouldn't be too late, though. Want me to wait up for you?" I offered, my tone casual. "No need," she said quickly, flashing me that fake smile she'd perfected. "You've been working hard. Get some rest." I nodded, forcing myself to smile back. "Okay, be safe." She left around 7 p.m., wearing a tight black dress that I hadn't seen before. She said it was just professional, but I knew better. As soon as she was gone, I got to work. First, I checked the hidden camera feed. Sure enough, her lover had been over earlier in the week, lounging on our couch like he owned the place. They didn't even bother to hide their intimacy. The footage was damning, and I knew it would be the centerpiece of my plan. Then I pulled out the burner phone I'd purchased. I'd used it to create an anonymous social media account, a fake profile under a generic name. Over the past few days, I'd been carefully planting hints about their affair online, dropping vague comments and messages in places they frequented. The goal wasn't just to expose Jenna, but to ensure that everyone she cared about would see the fallout. Finally, I made a phone call to Jenna's best friend, Sarah. Sarah was sharp, loyal, and always had my back. I suspected she didn't know about the affair, but I needed to make sure she wouldn't take Jenna's side blindly. "Hey, Sarah." I started, trying to sound calm. "Can we meet up tomorrow? I need to talk to you about something important." "Of course," she replied, her tone concerned. "Is everything okay?" "It will be," I said cryptically. "I just need your help with something." By the time Jenna came home around midnight, smelling of perfume and wine that weren't hers, I had everything I needed. She slipped into bed beside me, her tone sweet and affectionate, as if she hadn't just spent the evening with someone else. "Good night," she whispered, brushing her lips against my cheek. "Good night," I replied, staring at the ceiling, knowing tomorrow would change everything. The next morning, Jenna left early, claiming she needed to run errands. Perfect. That gave me time to execute my plan. I called Sarah and met her at a coffee shop. She was already seated, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "What's going on?" she asked as I sat down. I didn't waste time. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside were printed screenshots of Jenna's texts, emails, and photos with her lover. Sarah's face paled as she went through them. "Oh my God, is this real?" "Every word," I said grimly. She looked up at me, her voice trembling. "How long has this been going on?" "Months," I replied. "Maybe longer. And it's not just the affair. It's the lies, the way she's disrespected me in our own home." Sarah shook her head, visibly shaken. "I can't believe this. Jenna always acted like you two were perfect." "Well, she's a great actress," I said bitterly. "But I'm done playing the fool." I told Sarah about my plan, how I would confront Jenna, how I'd gathered evidence, and how I intended to make sure everyone knew the truth. Sarah hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but eventually nodded. "If she's done this to you, she deserves whatever's coming," she said. That evening, I put everything in place. Jenna came home around 6 p.m., looking surprised to see me waiting for her in the living room. "Hey," she said cautiously, setting her bag down. "What's up?" I stood, holding the envelope in my hand. "We need to talk." Her eyes flicked to the envelope, and I saw the first crack in her composure. "What's that?" "Sit down," I said firmly. She hesitated but eventually sat on the couch. I placed the envelope on the coffee table and crossed my arms. "Open it," I said. She frowned but obeyed, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled out the photos and messages. Her face went pale as she realized what she was looking at. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice shaky. "This," I said coldly, "is proof. Proof that you've been lying to me, cheating on me, and humiliating me for months." Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. I can explain. No. I interrupted, my voice sharp. You don't get to explain. You don't get to lie your way out of this. I know everything, Jenna. Everything. She sat there, frozen, as I continued. The late nights, the texts, the hotel meetups, the fact that you brought him into our home. I've seen the messages. I've seen the videos. Do you have any idea how disgusting that is? Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Don't, I snarled, cutting her off. You meant every second of it. You planned it, you lied about it, and you thought I'd never find out. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her expression. What are you going to do? I leaned in, my voice low and steady. You'll find out soon enough. I stood and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with her guilt and my cold silence. The storm was just beginning. The following morning, Jenna tried to act as if everything was fine. She prepared breakfast, dressed in her usual cheerful demeanor, and even attempted small talk. But I wasn't playing along. I barely looked at her, answering with curt, one-word replies. Around noon, I told her, "We're having company later. I expect you to be here." Company? Who? She asked, her voice laced with nervous curiosity. You'll see, I said, my tone icy. She fidgeted with her coffee mug but didn't press further. By 4 p.m., everything was set. The house was spotless, the camera feed was ready, and my phone was connected to the TV. Jenna was sitting on the couch, anxiously scrolling through her phone, when the doorbell rang. I'll get it, I said, standing before she could move. In walked Sarah and Jenna's parents. Her mom greeted me warmly, though her expression shifted when she saw the tension in the room. Thanks for coming, I said, ushering them into the living room. Jenna's face was a mix of confusion and growing panic. What's going on? She asked, her voice tight. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned on the TV and connected it to my phone. The first thing that appeared on the screen was a video, a recording of Jenna and her lover on our couch, her laughter ringing through the room as his hand roamed freely. What the hell is this? Jenna shouted, jumping to her feet. Her parents gasped audibly, and Sarah covered her mouth in shock. This, I said coldly, is the truth. The truth about what Jenna has been doing behind my back, behind your backs, and in this very house. Jenna rushed toward the TV, trying to grab the remote, but I stepped between her and the screen. Don't even think about it. Her mom stood, her face pale. Jenna, is this real? Jenna stammered. I can explain. No, you can't. I cut in. Because there's no excuse for what you've done. You've lied to me, to your family, and to everyone who ever trusted you. Her dad, usually quiet and reserved, spoke up, his voice trembling with anger. Jenna, what were you thinking? How could you do this to him? To us? Jenna was cornered, tears streaming down her face as she begged, please, stop this. We can talk about it privately. Privately? I laughed bitterly. You had no problem humiliating me in secret, so now we'll deal with it in the open. I turned to her parents. I thought you deserved to know who your daughter really is. And Sarah, I thought you'd want to see this too, since you've always been such a good friend to both of us. Jenna collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably, but I felt nothing. No pity, no guilt. Just a cold, calculated sense of justice. This is just the beginning, I said, staring down at her. You wanted to lie and cheat? Now you can live with the consequences. After her parents and Sarah left, Jenna and I were alone again. She sat on the couch, her tear-streaked face buried in her hands. The house was silent, save for her occasional sniffles. I stood by the window watching her crumble. Part of me wanted to feel satisfied, vindicated even, but instead, I felt a strange hollowness. I had spent weeks planning this moment, yet now that it was here, it wasn't enough. Why Jenna? I asked finally, my voice low and cold. Why him? Why betray me like this? She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. I don't know, she whispered. I didn't mean for it to happen. I scoffed, turning away. Don't give me that. I didn't mean to crap. You knew exactly what you were doing. Every text, every meetup, every time you brought him into this house. You planned it. It wasn't like that, she pleaded, standing shakily. It just happened. I was feeling distant, and he was there. I spun around, my anger flaring. Don't you dare blame me for this. Don't you even try to twist this into being my fault. You made a choice, Jenna. You chose to destroy everything we built. She flinched at the venom in my voice, but I didn't care. I was stupid enough to trust you, I continued, to believe in you, and you threw it all away for what? Some cheap thrill? Some loser who doesn't give a damn about you. Her face twisted in anger, and she snapped. You think I wanted this? Do you think I enjoyed sneaking around? I didn't plan to fall for him. Fall for him, I repeated, my chest tightening. So you love him now? Is that it? She froze, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. That silence was answer enough. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Unbelievable. You didn't just cheat, you caught feelings for him. Do you know how pathetic that makes you? Her tears started again, but I had no sympathy left. You've destroyed this marriage, I said, my voice steady. You've destroyed us, and now you're going to pay for it. She stared at me, her face pale. What does that mean? I didn't answer. I turned and walked upstairs, leaving her to sit in the wreckage of her lies. She didn't know it yet, but the worst was still to come. The next day, I sent out the first wave of evidence. Using the fake social media account I'd set up, I uploaded screenshots of her explicit messages and photos, carefully cropping out sensitive details but leaving just enough for everyone to know exactly what she'd been doing. The captions were brutal. Caught my wife cheating in our own home. Here's what loyalty looks like in 2025. I tagged her closest friends, some of her coworkers, and even a few mutual acquaintances who were active online. Within hours, the post went viral in our circle. Comments poured in. Some in shock, others disgusted. A few even defending her, though those were quickly drowned out. Jenna realized what was happening when her phone started blowing up with notifications. She came running into the living room, her face a mask of panic. What the hell is this? She screamed, shoving her phone in my face. I didn't even flinch. It's the truth, Jenna. The truth you've been hiding from everyone. You posted this? Her voice cracked, equal parts rage and despair. Damn right I did, I said, standing my ground. You wanted to keep your little affair a secret? Too bad. Everyone deserves to know who you really are. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments. Her friends were furious, calling her out for her lies. A few coworkers hinted at taking it to HR, noting how the affair might violate workplace policies. Why would you do this? She sobbed, collapsing onto the couch. Because you humiliated me, I said coldly. And now it's your turn. She stared at me, her tears streaming down her face. You don't understand what you've done. My job, my reputation. Exactly, I interrupted. Your actions have consequences, Jenna. You thought you could lie, cheat, and play me for a fool without any fallout? Guess again. Her phone rang. It was her boss. She let it go to voicemail, but the look on her face said it all. She knew what was coming. I watched her crumble, the weight of her choices finally crashing down around her. And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. That evening, I took the final step in my plan. It wasn't enough to expose Jenna. I wanted her lover to feel the full weight of his involvement. 2. Using the information I had gathered from their messages and emails, I tracked him down. His name was Ryan, and he worked at some mid-level corporate job. Based on his social media, he fancied himself a suave ladies' man. His smirking profile picture made my blood boil. I sent him a text from a burner number. We need to talk. I know about you and Jenna. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main at 8 p.m., or I come to your office. To my surprise, he replied quickly, Fine, be there. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Ryan was already there, sitting at a corner table with an air of cocky indifference. He looked up as I approached, his smirk faltering when he saw the expression on my face. "You must be the husband," he said, leaning back in his chair. I sat down, keeping my tone icy. "I am. And you're the piece of trash who's been sleeping with my wife." He chuckled, but it was a nervous sound. "Look, man, I didn't force her into anything. She came to me." I slammed a folder onto the table, cutting him off. "Shut up. I don't care how it started. What I care about is how it ends." He eyed the folder warily as I opened it, revealing the screenshots, videos, and photos. His face turned pale as he realized the extent of what I had. "You think this stays between us?" I asked, leaning in. "You think you can screw around with a married woman and walk away clean?" "Look, I don't want any trouble," he stammered. "It was just—" "Don't even finish that sentence," I said sharply. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to cut all ties with Jenna. No calls, no texts, nothing. If I even suspect you're still in contact, this folder goes to your boss, your family, and everyone else in your life." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine. And one more thing," I added, standing. "If I ever see you again, you'll regret it. Understand?" He swallowed hard, then nodded again. "Understood." I left him sitting there, his smug facade completely shattered. As I walked out, I felt a small sense of victory. He might not have been the root of the problem, but at least he wouldn't be part of it anymore. Back at home, Jenna was waiting, her eyes red from crying. "Where were you?" she asked softly. "Cleaning up your mess?" I replied, walking past her without another word. The next morning, Jenna's panic reached a fever pitch. She'd been glued to her phone all night, trying to do damage control with her friends and coworkers. "They're freezing me out," she said, her voice trembling. "Everyone's seen the posts." I didn't respond, calmly sipping my coffee. "What do you want from me?" she cried, standing in front of me. "What can I do to fix this?" I finally looked up. "You can't fix it, Jenna. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them." Her desperation turned to anger. "You're trying to ruin my life." "No," I said calmly. "You did that yourself." She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. The cracks in her facade were finally showing, and I was just getting started. That afternoon, I made one last move. I compiled everything, the texts, the videos, even the footage from the hidden camera, and sent it to her company's HR department. Her job was everything to her, the one thing she prided herself on. It was only fitting that she feel the full consequences of her actions there, too. By evening, she got the call. I watched as she answered, her face crumpling as the conversation unfolded. "They're suspending me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Pending an investigation." I didn't say a word. Her tears and pleas for sympathy fell on deaf ears. This was what she deserved, and she knew it. The next day, Jenna barely left the bedroom. I heard her pacing, crying, and making frantic calls to friends. None of them seemed to offer the support she was begging for. At one point, she came downstairs, her face pale and hollow. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Do you want a divorce? Is that it?"
He stared at her coldly.
"Divorce is coming. But this is about accountability. You don't get to walk away unscathed." Her hands trembled as she clutched the back of a chair. "I didn't think it would go this far," she muttered, more to herself than to me. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you threw away everything we had," I replied, my voice sharp. She didn't respond. She just sank into the chair, staring blankly at the floor. For the first time, she looked truly defeated. 2 days later, I filed for divorce. Jenna didn't say much when I told her, just nodded numbly, as though she'd finally accepted her fate. "I'll leave," she said quietly, staring at the floor. "I just need some time to pack my things." "Take whatever you need," I said coldly. "But don't drag it out." She hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. "For what it's worth."
I'm sorry.
"Sorry doesn't fix this," I replied, turning to leave. "You can't undo what you've done." As I walked out the door, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. The life I thought I had was gone, but at least now I could rebuild something real without her lies. The day Jenna finally left, The house felt empty but peaceful. I stood in the doorway, watching her load the last of her things into her car. She turned to look at me one last time, as if expecting me to say something, but I didn't. She got into the car and drove away, leaving behind the wreckage of what we'd once had. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. Therapy helped me process the betrayal, and I started reconnecting with old friends I'd pushed aside during my marriage. Jenna's public fall from grace had been swift. She lost her job, most of her friends, and the respect of everyone who had once admired her. As for her lover, I heard he'd been fired from his company after word of the affair reached his boss. I wasn't proud of everything I'd done, but I didn't regret it. Sometimes, people needed to face the consequences of their actions to truly understand the damage they'd caused. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that betrayal doesn't have to define you. You can take the pain, use it to grow, and come out stronger on the other side. And that's exactly what I'm doing. For anyone reading this who's going through something similar, don't ignore the signs. Don't let someone make you question your worth. And most importantly, never let betrayal break you.